Hi guys, welcome back. I'm out here in the woods today. Actually, I haven't been down here in a while, but it's a beautiful day. Unseasonably warm for November. It's in the high 70s today. So anyway, I wanted to come out here. I have been wanting to do this video for a few weeks now. So I assume that some of the people that are going to end up watching this will already know what it's about, but for those of you who don't, just to kind of give a little bit of quick background, Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm, who I love, a few weeks ago she posted a video. I'm sorry, I hope it's not going to be too loud on the video. We are like I'm in the woods, but we're like right next to the highway, so I hope the noise is not too loud. Anyway, a few weeks ago she posted a video talking about the growing concern of, as AI is becoming a bigger and bigger thing, you know, tool like anything else that can be used for good or bad, or even unintentional bad in some cases, I'm sure. But anyway, there's a growing issue with not knowing if the information you're receiving is, you know, real trustworthy information that you know, was put out there by a human who knows what they're talking about, basically. And of course, I think a lot of us know that this is a really big issue online. Of course, you know, that makes sense. Digital, AI, all that goes together. And that's concerning also, but I think what a lot of people don't realize, I didn't even realize until I saw her video, is that there is a growing number of like print books that you can buy that are actually written by AI, not by a person, and therefore that the information in them cannot be accurate. Now, in some cases that may not be a big deal. You know, if it's subject matter where that's not a big deal. It could be an annoyance, or, you know, it could be cause inconveniences, but there are some cases, apparently there have been issues with books like on herbal medicine and on foraging, like plant identification, things like that, where there are books being put out on these subjects written by AI, not by a human that knows what they're talking about, that has some inaccurate information in them, which when it comes to things like that, that can be a big deal. That can be, you know, serious. People misidentifying plants or mushrooms or herbs or using them incorrectly, you know, that can be really potentially damaging, possibly even deadly in some circumstances. So, you know, not something to be taken lightly. So, shortly after putting out that video talking about these issues, she put out basically open invitation to collab for other content creators within the circle of, you know, farming, gardening, homesteading, that kind of niche, to create videos talking about books or other resources that we know have solid information in them that we use, that we reference, and putting those out there as a list for, you know, others to come in and get good recommendations for that kind of thing, basically. So I've wanted to do this video ever since I saw that one, ever since she put it out. And finally kind of got all my ducks in a row to do it. And so that's what I'm out here today to talk about, some books. So I have 5 books that I want to share and talk about a little bit. Of course, I'm going to be telling you the titles and authors and everything as I go, but in case you miss anything, I will be listing all the titles and authors in the description of the video. And I am also going to link them. All of these books are available on Amazon. Some of them are available in Kindle form, but they're all available in print form. So, yeah, you know, if any of these are something you want to buy and you're in a position to buy them new and you want to use my links, awesome, great, appreciate that. But also, I don't want you to think that's why I'm doing this. It's not. I bought, I mean, 2 of these books I think were gifted to me. One or 2 of them I bought new, and 1 or 2 of them I bought secondhand. So If you aren't in a position where you can buy them new, I think a really good resource for buying secondhand books is thrift books. I buy quite a few books through there. There isn't always a huge price difference, but in some cases it can save you some money. And I would also absolutely encourage, if you aren't sure if you want to buy the book, you think you might want to check it out, but don't necessarily want to spring for buying it. Totally get that. I'm the same way. In fact, one of these, like this one, looks brand new because it pretty much is. I actually bought that copy fairly recently, but when I first wanted to read that book, I found it in a local library and I read it and I took a bunch of notes, and I eventually got to the point where I was like, I just really want to have an actual physical copy of that book, because there were a couple things that I couldn't find in my notes. And so anyway, libraries, great resource. If any of your local libraries have a book that you want to look at, and if they don't, sometimes you can do an interlibrary loan. So anyway, definitely check that out. But without rambling on anymore, I'm going to actually get into the books. So first one up is probably going to be recommended a lot by people within this community. I think it's a really important place to start because, most of us, I think a lot of our motivation in doing all these kind of things is because we want better food for us and for our families. Better food, better nutrition, better quality. We want to know where it came from, all that. So this is definitely in the vein of that. Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, Morell. And this book, like right here, it says the cookbook that challenges politically correct nutrition and the diet dictocrats. So this book definitely challenges a lot of the modern mainstream nutritional advice that has been given to us. And I think as a society, we're starting to realize that a lot of this information that has been pushed at us for the last several decades is incorrect and has been very damaging to our health. But anyway, this is based on the work and the studies of Dr. Weston A. and his research surrounding the diets and health of various traditional cultures that had not yet been adulterated by modern industrialized agriculture and food at the time. I'm sure a lot of them have been by now, and that's unfortunate. But anyway, so this book, the first probably third of it goes through, maybe not quite that much, but anyway, it goes through and it explains a lot of the role of various nutrients, minerals, vitamins found in foods, kind of explains some about how they work in the body, their role, the problems that can arise when we are deficient of them, and the best sources of them, which are largely animal products, and not all of them. I mean, also, plant products, and basically challenging a lot of what we've been told about the best way to get these nutrients and the bioavailability of them, and the ability of the body to use them, things like that. So the first part of the book is all talking about that, and then it moves into talking about a lot of the main foods that it recommends, like organ meats and things like that, and specifically what they have in them and their benefits for the body and things like that. And then the rest of it is pretty much like a regular cookbook, just lots of recipes with some other information kind of scattered in the margins. that, you know, are using these traditional foods that it talks about. So definitely a great place to start. I'm not going to say I am living and eating by everything this book says. I mean, I kind of wish I were in an ideal world, but it's like anything, it's a process. And I think this book's just a great place to start to understand that kind of thing and challenge some of the things that we're doing and, you know, move towards doing a little bit better. So, good place to start. Along the same lines is the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care by Sally Fallon, Morell, and Thomas Cowan. Obviously, one of those same authors, that one. A lot of the same kind of thing. This one, you know, as the name would suggest, is more specific to babies and children, but also in the health of adults, both the mother and the father, during pregnancy and the preconception time period, and the best way to support optimum health for that through nutrition. The best way, you know, to support your body, to make sure you're have sufficient amounts of all these nutrients that are very necessary for, you know, creating a whole human and making sure that our bodies are as healthy as possible to create children who are as healthy as possible, and then how to feed them once they are born to continue that trend as they grow. So, you know, a lot of similar information to the first book, but more specific to everything surrounding child rearing. In the same vein as cooking is food preservation. This is probably my most used book when it comes to the thing that I reference the most when it comes to canning and such. And it's the Complete Guide to Home Canning. And there's like kind of a few different printings, but basically this is, you know, USDA. This is basically, if you go onto the NCHFP website, which is the National Center for Home Food Preservation, it has a lot of canning, pickling, and there's also information in here about fermenting, dehydrating, other preservation methods as well. I just use the most for canning. If you go onto their website, I'm pretty sure everything in this book is on that website for free. So you can absolutely access it there. You can print things off of there even on your own. But I really like having a physical copy printed out that I can just, you know, open up. I've got bookmarks in here for things that I've been doing recently. Because to me, it's a lot more convenient to just be able to open it to the page, lay it out on the counter, and then I can look at it while I'm working instead of trying to have to scroll back through my phone and all that. So, you know, like, yesterday I made pickled sweet green tomatoes for the first time. There's a recipe that I use for that. So that's very handy. I like to just know I have it, so I don't have to worry about printing things out. And sometimes I can't find this, and I still look things up online. That's a perfectly good way to do it. I just find this a little bit easier. Along with cooking and nutrition and preservation, a lot of us from that will get into gardening because buying a lot of produce and things like that can get expensive. Definitely a valid option in places to do that, but when it comes to gardening, I don't have a lot of books on just the general topic of gardening, I would say, or gardening for beginners. This book is probably the gardening book that I reference most. And this one, it does have general growing information in it as well for each of these plant groups, but this one I would specifically recommend to those of us who are wanting to save seeds particularly of heirloom varieties that we want to preserve as heirloom varieties. That, you know, there's nothing wrong with cross-pollination and saving seeds from that. You're still going to get tomatoes, you're still going to get squash, but it's not as predictable. But if there are heirloom varieties that you want to grow from year to year and have them be the same and predictable and preserve that heirloom variety, I think this book is super handy. It is called Seed to Seed: Seed Saving and Growing Techniques for Vegetable Gardeners. It's by Suzanne Ashworth. And it is a very specific guide to seed saving. It has like seed saving techniques for specifically how you save seeds for each plant, but the thing that I find the most helpful about it is that it gives you information on the requirements for each plant family for like distance between them. So some plants you can actually grow in really pretty close proximity to each other without them significantly cross-pollinating. Tomatoes don't have to be separated by a ton of space, but there are other things like corn that are pollinated by the wind, and so they can pollinate quite a distance away. So, you know, especially for those of us who live in rural areas, we're nearby where people are growing, you know, entire fields of you know, commercial type corn, and we don't want to pollinate, we don't want that to cross-pollinate with the corn we're trying to grow and save seeds from if it's an heirloom variety. So it talks about the specific distances that need to be between types of plants so they won't cross-pollinate, and it also gives you other techniques for like artificially pollinating and stuff, so you can bypass that if it's not an option for you. You know, if you're trying to grow heirloom corn and your next door neighbor is growing a field of corn, you can't do much about that. So there are other options for hand pollinating, things like that. It goes over things like that in a lot of detail, and it also gives a lot of information on it. This is probably not going to show well, but it has, you know, your families of things, you know, your brassicas, which is your broccoli and greens and things like that. But then it breaks it down further into the different groups within that. So, for example, like Brassica oleracea is the family for most, like kale and collards and things like that. And then there's Brassica nigra and Brassica rapa, which is like turnips and cabbages and things like that. So it breaks it down further into those, and there's a lot of that within the groups, and it talks about how much, if or how much cross-pollination will happen between those kind of different groups, because in some cases they will cross-pollinate readily across those families, and in some cases they will not. And so that kind of gives you some information about what things you maybe can plant closer together that you maybe didn't think you could, because they won't cross-pollinate with each other. So really interesting, I think. If you're nerdy about saving seeds and heirloom varieties and things like that, I think this is a really handy thing to have. Also, you know, once we get into gardening and things like that, something I really wanted to include in this was a book on herbs and herbalism. So I used to be super into herbs and learning about them, and I don't want to say that like I'm not now. It just hasn't been as big a part of my life. You know, one time, about 4 years ago, I was super into it, reading books about it all the time. You know, I was making tinctures and teas and things like that for myself. I was even taking online courses on the subject, and I was very into it. But then I became pregnant with my daughter, and I got real careful real fast about putting anything into my body that I wasn't completely sure about. I didn't take anything when I was pregnant. I didn't even take Tylenol, and I was very careful with herbs too. There are some herbs that are known to be safe during pregnancy, and there's a lot of them that probably are, but that we don't know for 100% sure, and I just wasn't going to take that risk because I didn't have to, so I just kind of laid off from that. And of course, once I had a small child, still have a small child, I just don't have a lot of spare time to be taking online courses and stuff. It is something that I want to revisit for sure, and it's something that I would love to make a video talking about, because I have a lot of books on the subject. I do, and I was trying to look through them and think of one that I thought I could recommend, but since it's been a few years since I was really into it, I didn't feel confident picking one and saying, yes, this is the one, because I'm just far enough removed from it that I just wouldn't feel confident doing that for human purposes. However, I do have a book that is about herbs, herbal medicine in this realm of animal husbandry, using herbs for livestock. It's called The Complete Herbal Handbook for Farm and Stable by, excuse me if I mispronounce her name, but Juliette de Baracli-Levy. She also has a book that's specifically for cats and dogs, herbs for cats and dogs. But anyway, this book, I really like it, and it's an older book. It was originally published in 1952, I think. Yeah, 1952 was the original copyright. So it's an older book, like 70 years old. And the first, has a little bit of an introduction, and then it talks some about gathering and preparation of herbs, and then it has quite a bit of it that is a list, it's a materia medica, a list of herbs, description of them. It organizes them by their most common name, but it also has their Latin names so we can all be sure what we're talking about, because common names can be more than one herb is sometimes called by the same common name. So just to be clear, we always have to use Latin names just to be 100%. But anyway, it will have the herb, it will have a description of it, then it talks some about the uses for it in treating livestock, what it's good for, and some information about preparing and dosage and things like that. So quite a big section about that, and then once it's gone through all that, then it starts talking about individual animals. So it has information on sheep, goats, cows, horses, poultry, sheepdogs, and it also has a chapter on the natural care of bees, which I think is really interesting. And then there's a little bit more. So, and within each of those animal groups, talk some about general husbandry, I would say, and then it starts to go through specific ailments that are common in those animals and how we can use herbs to treat those. So, a lot of really useful, practical information in it, I think. But another thing that I also just really love about it is that it's written, and it's an older book. I think a lot of times with older books, we just have to go into it knowing that we might have to take some things with a grain of salt with any source of information, really. And with anything, would encourage to double check maybe with some newer information. But I think there's also a lot of value in older books, older resources, older knowledge, advice, because I think we tend to think we know everything now. And there are certainly some things we've made advances on, but I think there are a lot of things that we think we have done better on, and eventually we realize maybe they knew what they were talking about all So really love older resources for that. And I also love that the entire attitude of the author within this book is, the book is written with such an attitude of what we would now call holistic or, you know, regenerative, sustainable practices. And being written in 1952, it was kind of at that threshold of, there was already a lot of industrialization and commercialization of agriculture, and they were starting to use a lot of chemicals and things like that. Obviously, we've a lot more now, but it was right, you know, kind of in the beginning of where that was starting to happen a lot, and therefore a lot of these new problems were starting to come up. But it was also at a time when there were still a lot of people who were practicing the old traditional ways. You know, now it's organic, then it was just how you did it. And so that's what a lot of the information in this book is from. You know, she talks about getting a lot of this information from gypsy and peasant farmers and their traditional way of doing things. And she also talks about, you know, the issues with modern husbandry practices, confinement, and you know, that pastures lack all of these herbs because they're sprayed, and you know, they try to just make them all monoculture grass, and the problems that arise because of that. And also, I love it, you know, there's a part in here, probably couldn't find it right now. Well, sure I can. Okay, found it. So the background leading up to this is she's talking about how these various herbs should be grown in the pastures where the animals are kept, like within the hedgerows. And she has a whole list of, let's see, where was it? Aniseed, balm, borage, dill, fennel, horehound, hyssop, marjoram, tansy, vervain, and wormwood, chicory, rush, comfrey, chicory, and garlic. So she's talking about growing things like this within the pastures so that the animals have access to them. Of course, you can go gather them if you need to, but the animals also have access to them. And so here's so a gypsy horse trader, Jack Vincent, said wisely when discussing horse medicine with me that he never had to medicine his animals because they took their own cures from the hedgerows where he grazed them daily in different parts of the countryside. So that is also, you know, part of the attitude to this whole thing is not only, if good husbandry practices are used, not only are ailments and issues uncommon in the animals, but also that when they have the resources, when they have the herbs at their disposal, often they have the instinctive intelligence to go eat these herbs on their own and self-treat. I remember there was another part in it where I was reading where you know, cows around the time of birth would go eat ivy because that's one of the herbs recommended for issues, you know, surrounding that they would just go eat it on their own around that time. So I think that's really interesting, and really a beautiful way about this book is written is just the whole attitude that, you know, the way animals are often raised now is the problem, and that most of the solution to that is just better husbandry practices and access to these various herbs and plants so that they can, you know, treat themselves, and that also we can intervene and treat them when necessary. So that one, definitely recommend. That's really, I also couldn't really find or think of a book specifically on the topic of general husbandry that I really felt like I wanted to include. But what I did want to kind of include and talk about is not a book recommendation per se, but like an activity recommendation. And Jess actually talked about this too. She touched on it. Compiling your own information, because I think having books is great, a lot of great resources, but I also think there is a lot of value in compiling your own set of information that is specific to what you find useful and valuable. So when I was looking through my books, I ran across this, which is my goat book. You see I've got my little picture of a fainting goat laminated onto there with Scotch tape. I made this when I was, I don't know, like 11 or 12, somewhere in there. We first got goats when I was in 5th grade, and I wasn't even in 4-H at the time. I did eventually get into 4-H in the goat program for that. But this is a binder where I, at that time, compiled all of the useful things that I found to be useful information about goats. And I had goats on and off for pretty much the next decade, up into my early 20s. Don't currently have any. Might again someday. But this was kind of a good reminder for me that this is a good idea, because I think a lot of us, me definitely, get very dependent on the idea of digital information always being available, and it's not necessarily, not even anything catastrophic. Sometimes things just get lost, or websites, you know, people stop paying to have them up. You know, the website that I got some of this information for probably don't exist anymore. I've had it happen before where I saved recipes on Pinterest and went back to find it again, and the website was down, or the blog had been, you know, deleted, whatever. It happens. And that's something that I've been thinking lately, is that I really need to get back to printing out or writing down the recipes that I actually use often. You know, the other day I was looking for a recipe, and it'll happen like I know the recipe exists, and I remember that I saw it online, but was that on Facebook or was it on Pinterest, and I have to go look a couple different places. And so and you know, sometimes we save things when we think, oh, that sounds good, maybe I would try that. But then you know, once I have tried something and I think I'm definitely gonna make that again, I should really print it out. Anyway, I think compiling your own resources like this is a really good idea, both for security and just for convenience, because you know, you might have a dozen books that all have useful information in them, but if you maybe can't remember exactly where that information was, if you're trying to look through it, especially sometimes, you know, we're in a kind of a maybe time sensitive situation, got a sick animal, something like that, you need to look something up. So like in here, and this was from when I was younger, so there's some stuff in here that, you know, maybe today I would not include if I had a goat book that I was just starting. But this is an article on, you know, basic goat care, and this is one on fecal testing techniques. And we used to have a lot of worm issues where we lived when I had goats. We lived in a very wet area, a very swampy area, so there was and a lot of deer, so we had a lot of worm issues. That was on goat medications, and I've got, there's a bunch of like goat milk recipes in here that a lot of them I never made. Somewhere in here I've got a chart for, like a weight tape chart, like if you measure your goat to get a weight estimate. I've got handwritten notes in here on medication dosages for how much we used to give Ivomec orally because at the time I was young and I didn't want to give them shots, so you have to give a higher dosage for that. So I have things like that, the information on the dosage to worm them orally, things like that. Basically anything that I was like, this is an important thing that to know about goats, I put it in here so I would know where to find it if I needed it. So definitely recommend doing that. This is something that this has been a good reminder for me that this is something I need to work on doing again with a lot of things like recipes and things like that. Basically anything that I find myself referencing online frequently, I should probably have in print somehow. So anyway, that is my list of book recommendations. I'm really looking forward to seeing what other people have recommended. I actually haven't watched, I looked at the playlist for these collab videos and I just looked at it to kind of see how it was doing, but I have not watched any of the videos yet. Partially I didn't want to be influenced in making my own, so I wanted to make mine before I watch any of the other ones, but I'm really interested to watch them, see what kind of stuff other people recommend. Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with me. If you're still watching, this is longer than my videos usually are, so thank you for hanging in there if you did. I hope this was helpful. If you have any, if you have these books and want to put anything in the comments, any additional thoughts you have on them, or anything kind of in the same line as these that you think maybe I should check out, definitely would be interested to hear about that. Or also if you check out any of them after watching this, please let me know what you thought, if you think they are, valuable, or if you think there's a better thing that does what they do. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and for hanging out with me for a little bit. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.